The war room stretched across 3 levels of the massive space station. 12 different species sat around a table that could have held a small building. The air hummed with translation, devices working overtime to turn growls, clicks, and whistles into words everyone could understand. Commander slammed his crystal fist on the table. The sound rang like breaking glass. His species thus stood 9 feet tall and wore armor that grew from their bones. "We lost another system yesterday," he announced. "The Devourers consumed everything, 3 billion souls gone." Murmurs of anger filled the room. The Devourers were winning this war. They moved like a plague across the galaxy, eating entire planets and growing stronger with each meal. The Galactic Defense Coalition had been fighting them for 2 years. They were losing badly. "My warriors destroyed 40 of their bioships," said General Ravda. Her people looked like walking flames wrapped in metal. They could melt steel with their bare hands. "But for everyone we killed, 10 more took its place." "The same story everywhere," added Chief L. The shapeshifter currently looked like a gray liquid held together by will alone. "My infiltrators report their numbers are endless. They learn from every battle. They adapt faster than we can change our tactics." The other species nodded grimly. They brought their lightning weapons. The steelheads had ships that could crack moons. The thornbacks fought with poison that could kill gods, all useless against an enemy that just kept coming and learning. A soft chime announced a new arrival. The massive doors opened and a small figure walked in. The alien warriors barely looked up. It was just the human representative. Humans were the members of the coalition. Their planet Earth had joined only 5 years ago. Most species considered them useful for making things and planning battles, but not much else. They were small, soft, and slow. Their weapons were primitive. Their ships were weak. They had no natural armor, no energy attacks, no shape-changing abilities. Ambassador Sarah walked to the one empty chair. She was average height for a human, which made her tiny compared to everyone else. Her hair was gray, and she wore a simple blue uniform. She carried no weapons. She showed no fear. "Sorry I'm late," she said quietly. "Had to finish the supply reports." Commander barely acknowledged her presence. "We were discussing our losses. Perhaps your people have new manufacturing capabilities to offer." "We do what we can," replied. "But I thought this meeting was about strategy, not supplies." Several aliens made sounds that might have been laughter. Strategy from humans meant long discussions and careful plans. Real warriors preferred action. "Perhaps we should share stories instead," suggested General Ra. "Stories of our greatest warriors. It might lift our spirits in these dark times." The suggestion sparked interest. Each species loved their legends. They spent the next hour trading tales of heroes who could split mountains, warriors who fought armies alone, and champions who never knew defeat. The told of or the unbreakable who held a mountain pass against 1,000,000 enemies for 30 days. His crystal armor never cracked. His sword never dulled. When reinforcements arrived, they found him still standing, surrounded by bodies piled higher than buildings. They shared the legend of Flameheart, who burned so bright in battle that enemy fleets surrendered rather than face her. She once melted an entire asteroid to stop an invasion. The heat from her rage could be felt 3 star systems away. They spoke of the Thousand Face, a shapeshifter so skilled they became an entire army. They fought a war by pretending to be every soldier on both sides, ending the conflict when their enemies realized they had been fighting shadows. Each story grew more impossible than the last. Warriors who lived for centuries, heroes who destroyed planets, champions who fought gods and won. Ambassador listened quietly. When the stories ended, General Ra turned to her with what might have been politeness. "Do humans have such legends?" he asked. "Stories of great warriors from your past?" Nodded slowly. "We do many stories." "Please share one," Commander said. His tone suggested he was being generous, allowing the weak species to participate. Thought for a moment. There were warriors called Vikings. They came from cold northern lands on our world. When they went to war, enemies would flee just hearing their ships were coming. They believed dying in battle was the only way to reach paradise. They fought with axes and swords, wearing nothing but leather and mail. Silence filled the room. Then Commander made a sound like grinding stone. Laughter. "Leather and mail," he wheezed. "Against what enemies? Other humans with sticks." "They fought other Vikings mostly," admitted, "and various kingdoms and empires." More laughter filled the room. The steelheads made clanging sounds of amusement. The thornbacks hissed with mirth. "Forgive us," said General Ra, though she didn't sound sorry, "but humans fighting humans with primitive weapons. It sounds like children playing war games." "Tried again. We had warriors called Spartans. 300 of them held off an army of thousands at a narrow pass. They fought to the last man." 300 against thousands? Chief L sounded genuinely curious. "Well, they had some allies, maybe 7,000 total." This brought fresh waves of laughter. 7,000 defending against thousands. The Alone had warriors who could face those odds alone. "What about your modern warriors?" asked Commander, wiping crystal tears from his eyes. "Surely they're more impressive." Seemed to struggle with the question. "Our soldiers are dedicated, they train hard, they follow orders, they don't give up easily." "How admirably vague," General Ross said. "Do they have any special abilities, energy weapons, battle rage, psychic powers?" "They carry rifles, wear armor, use tactics and teamwork mostly." The laughter died to chuckles. Even the aliens felt bad now. Human warriors sounded so ordinary, so limited. No wonder their species needed protection. In the back of the room, Sergeant Major watched the meeting in silence. She had said nothing during the entire discussion. Her face showed no emotion as the aliens mocked her species' military history. She simply stood at attention, hands clasped behind her back, dark eyes studying each speaker in turn. None of the alien warriors paid her any attention. She looked like just another human administrator. Small, quiet, unremarkable. They had no idea what those scars meant. They had no idea what human wars were really like. They had no idea that their greatest warriors would run screaming from what humans called Tuesday. But they would learn soon enough. The next morning found the alien warriors in the station's recreation area. The massive space could house a small city. Different sections were built for different species. They had crystal gardens that rang like wind chimes. The practiced in chambers hot enough to melt lead. The flowed through obstacle courses that changed shape every second. Commander was telling another group about yesterday's meeting. "The humans shared their war stories," he said, his voice carrying across the crystal garden. "Vikings who fought with axes, Spartans who used shields and spears. Can you imagine?" The listening made grinding sounds of amusement. Their own weapons could level buildings. Their armor could stop starship cannons. The idea of warriors using metal tools seemed like a joke. "Tell them about the numbers," urged Captain K, second in command. 7,000 humans held a mountain pass, announced. Their ambassador seemed proud of this achievement. More laughter echoed through the gardens. A single warrior could hold a mountain pass alone. 7,000 seemed like massive overkill for such a simple task. General Ra arrived from her own training area, still glowing with heat from her exercises. "Are we still discussing human fairy tales?" "I looked up more of their legends," said Chief L, shifting into a more solid form. "They have stories about knights in metal suits who rode animals into battle. Animals, not vehicles or war beasts, but ordinary animals they put metal shoes on." "Horses," corrected Ambassador, who had been walking past. "They're called horses." "Yes, horses," L continued. "They fought with long sticks and chunks of metal, yet somehow these knights supposedly spread fear across their continents." Paused in her walking. "Well, they did conquer most of Europe and parts of the Middle East during the Crusades." "Conquering other humans with sticks," General Ra pointed out. "Not exactly impressive when your enemies have the same limitations." "What about their modern military?" asked Captain K. "Surely they've advanced beyond animals and metal sticks." Looked uncomfortable. "Our current military uses advanced technology, rifles, armor, vehicles, aircraft." "Energy weapons," pressed. "Kinetic projectiles mostly. Plasma attacks. Chemical explosives. Personal shields. Tactical armor and cover." Each answer brought more sounds of alien amusement. Human warfare sounded so primitive, so limited. They threw bits of metal at each other and hid behind barriers. "Perhaps we could observe their training," suggested General Ra. "Learn what passes for warrior preparation among humans." An hour later, the delegation stood in the human section of the training facility. It was smaller than the others, built for a much weaker species. The equipment looked crude compared to what the aliens used. Human soldiers practiced with what the aliens recognized as projectile weapons. They moved in small groups, communicating with hand signals and short radio bursts. Their movements were precise but seemed slow. Their weapons were loud but appeared weak. "Is this a beginner's class?" asked Chief L. "These are experienced soldiers," replied. "Some are special forces." The aliens watched human soldiers practice room clearing. They used flashbang grenades and coordinated movements. It looked like an elaborate dance designed for fighting other humans in buildings. "Where is the rage?" asked Captain K. "Where is the fury? They fight like they're afraid of getting hurt." "Humans prefer tactics over raw aggression," explained. "Because they're too weak for anything else," muttered General Ra. In the corner of the training area, Sergeant Major supervised a smaller group. Her soldiers moved differently than the others, faster, quieter, with an edge that made even the alien observers unconsciously keep their distance. Commander noticed her and approached. Up close, he could see the scars that covered her hands and neck. Long, deep marks that spoke of serious combat. Strange for a member of such a peaceful species. "Sergeant Major," he said, his voice automatically adjusting to what he considered an appropriate tone for addressing human military. Polite but not respectful. "How long have you served?" 23 years, sir," replied without looking away from her soldiers. "In what conflicts?" "Various operations, the pacification wars mostly." Had never heard of these wars. Internal disputes. "You could say that?" His voice carried no emotion. Her dark eyes reflected nothing. "What did you pacify?" General Ra asked, joining the conversation. Finally looked at her, felt an unexpected chill despite her natural heat. "Whatever needed pacifying, ma'am." The answer told them nothing while somehow saying everything. There was something in the human's eyes that reminded of the look predators got just before they struck. Strange for such a physically weak species. "Your scars," Captain K observed. "They look severe. What caused them?" "Various things, sir." "Weapons, accidents, training incidents." "Yes, sir." The aliens exchanged glances. Human military personnel apparently had no interest in sharing war stories. How different from their own cultures, where warriors competed to tell the most impressive battle tales. "Perhaps you could demonstrate your combat techniques," suggested Chief L. "We're curious about human training methods." For the first time smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. "I don't think that would be appropriate, sir." "Why not?" "Our training is designed for specific operational environments. It might not translate well to demonstration scenarios." "Surely you could show us basic techniques," pressed General Ra. "How humans handle close combat." Looked at her soldiers. They had stopped their own training to listen. Several of them had the same look in their eyes that their sergeant major carried, the look of people who had seen things they didn't discuss. "Ma'am, our close combat training assumes certain conditions," said carefully. "No rules, no surrender, no retreat. It's not designed for sparring or demonstration. It's designed for killing." The word hung in the air like a weapon. The aliens had heard it before, of course. They all killed in battle. But something about how this small, humans said it made them reconsider what the word might mean. "All military training involves killing," Commander pointed out. "Yes, sir, but human military training involves killing humans. That requires different techniques." Another uncomfortable silence. The aliens had fought many species, but always enemies who were obviously different. Fighting your own species would require a different mindset entirely. "The pacification wars," General Ra said slowly. "You fought other humans." "Yes, ma'am." "For what purpose?" Smile returned, colder than before. "To pacify them, ma'am." Captain K made a sound of frustration. "Can you be more specific? What was the conflict about? Who won? How many died?" For a long moment, said nothing. When she spoke, her voice carried a weight that made the aliens suddenly understand why her soldiers looked at her with such respect. "Sir, the pacification wars were classified as minor internal conflicts by the Galactic Council. The details remain restricted. What I can tell you is that we achieved our objectives. Complete pacification was accomplished. No further action was required." She turned back to watching her soldiers train. The conversation was clearly over. The aliens left the human training area more confused than when they arrived. Human warriors seemed weak, limited, and primitive. Yet something about Sergeant Major and her soldiers suggested there was more to human warfare than primitive weapons and simple tactics. But they were too proud to admit that a weaker species might have knowledge they lacked, too confident in their own superiority to ask the right questions. They would regret that pride very soon. The argument started in the station's main dining hall. Lieutenant, fresh out of Earth's military academy, had been listening to alien warriors mock human legends for 3 days. His patience finally snapped. "You think our stories are funny?" Stood up, his meal forgotten. At 25, he was young for a coalition officer, but his service record was clean. "You think human warriors are weak?" Commander looked down at the human with amusement. "I think your species has limited experience with real warfare. No shame in that." "Limited experience?" His voice rose. "Humans have been fighting wars for thousands of years." "Against other humans," General Ra pointed out. "With primitive weapons, it's not the same as facing a real enemy." Several alien warriors at nearby tables stopped eating to watch. Arguments between species were rare in the coalition. Usually, the weaker species knew their place. A real enemy stepped closer to his table. "You want to see what human training produces? Let's find out." The dining hall went quiet. Even the stopped shifting shapes to watch. A human was challenging a warrior. This would be over quickly. Commander stood slowly. His 9-foot frame cast a shadow over. Crystal armor grew from his bones with sounds like breaking glass. "You wish to fight me, little human?" "Just a demonstration," said, though his hands were shaking. "Show everyone what human combat training accomplishes." The voice came from across the room. Sergeant Major approached their table with slow, measured steps. "Stand down." "Ma'am, they've been insulting our military for days," protested. "And you think a training match will change their minds?" "It's worth trying." Studied the crowd of alien faces watching them. All showed the same expression of anticipation mixed with pity. They expected the young human to be crushed quickly and thoroughly. "Very well," she said finally, "but I'll take your place." Started to object, but something in her eyes stopped him. Captain K laughed openly. "The woman, this should be even more amusing." "Training arena in 10 minutes, announced. "Basic combat demonstration, non-lethal engagement." Word spread quickly through the station. By the time they reached the training arena, hundreds of coalition personnel had gathered to watch. Representatives from all 12 species filled the observation areas. Even the shapeshifting held solid forms to get better views. The arena itself was designed to accommodate different species. The floor could be adjusted from solid metal to liquid plasma depending on the combatants. For this match, they set it to standard artificial gravity and atmosphere. Entered first, his crystal armor gleaming under the arena lights. He carried no weapons. Warriors preferred hand-to-hand combat where their natural armor gave them advantages. He looked confident, relaxed, even bored. Entered wearing standard human combat fatigues. No armor, no weapons, nothing that might give her an edge against a 9-foot crystal giant. She looked tiny in comparison, almost fragile. "Are you sure about this?" Ambassador asked from the observation deck. "It's just a demonstration," General Ra replied. "No one will be seriously hurt." The referee, a neutral AI system, announced the rules. No lethal force. Match ends when one combatant yields or cannot continue. Standard coalition safety protocols in effect. Raised his arms and roared. The sound echoed through the arena like an avalanche. His crystal armor flared with inner light, each piece growing thicker and more jagged. This was the battle rage, a state where they became nearly unstoppable forces of destruction. Stood perfectly still. She didn't roar, didn't pose, didn't try to look intimidating. She simply watched with the same dark eyes that had made the aliens uncomfortable during training. The match began. Charged immediately, covering the distance between them in seconds. His crystalline fist could crush steel. It moved faster than most humans could see. Wasn't there when it arrived. She had moved with liquid grace, sliding under his arm and behind his shoulder. Her hand touched a specific point on his crystal armor and suddenly was stumbling, his balance gone. The arena fell silent. Warriors didn't stumble. Their inner ear systems were too advanced, their sense of balance too perfect. Hao spun around, swinging his other arm in a wide arc. Again wasn't there. This time she appeared at his left knee, her hand striking another precise point. His leg buckled, dropping him to one knee. "This is impossible," Captain K muttered from the observation deck. "She's hitting nerve clusters that don't exist in our species." But they did exist. Had studied anatomy, learned their pressure points, memorized every weakness in their crystal armor. She fought with the precision of someone who had studied how to kill efficiently. Roared again and spun on his knee, crystal spikes erupting from his armor. The spikes should have impaled anything within reach. Flowed between them like water, her movements so smooth they seemed almost choreographed. She reached his throat, fingers finding the exact spot where crystal armor met flesh. Froze, a human hand pressed against his throat, right where a simple squeeze could collapse his windpipe. The match was over. For a moment, nobody moved. Then the emergency klaxons began wailing. "All senior personnel to the command center immediately," the station AI announced. "Priority Alpha emergency. All senior personnel to command center immediately." Released and stepped back. The commander stood slowly, his crystal armor retracting with sounds like grinding glass. He looked at the small human woman with something approaching respect. "How did you know our anatomy so precisely?" he asked. "I study my enemies," replied simply. "Enemies, we're allies." Smile was cold as winter. "Are we?" Before anyone could respond to that unsettling comment, they were rushing to the command center. The emergency briefing was short and terrifying. A Devourer scout force had been detected in the system, 3 jumps away from the refugee colony of New Haven. 2 million civilians, mostly families fleeing the war, were trapped there with minimal defenses. "Fastest response time is 18 hours, reported the station commander. "The Devourers will reach the colony in 6. "Evacuation," suggested General Ra. "Not enough transport ships. We might save 10% of the population." Grim silence filled the command center. Everyone knew what this meant. 2 million people were about to die, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. "Wait," said Ambassador. "The human frigate Determination is conducting patrol exercises 2 systems out. They could reach New Haven in 4 hours. Commander shook his head. A single frigate against Devourer bioships. It would be suicide, meaningless sacrifice. "Not meaningless," said quietly. "We could evacuate some civilians, buy time for the main fleet." "You'd all die," Captain K pointed out. "Maybe," agreed, "but we'd die doing our job." The alien warriors looked at each other with expressions of confusion and pity. Humans apparently didn't understand when they were beaten. They kept fighting even when victory was impossible. "I'll need volunteers," announced. "This is strictly voluntary. Anyone who comes should understand we probably won't be coming back." "I'll go," said Lieutenant immediately. "So will I," added Corporal Martinez from the back of the room. "And me," said Sergeant. Within minutes, 12 humans had volunteered for what everyone assumed was a suicide mission. The alien warriors watched in amazement. These humans seemed eager to throw their lives away for strangers. "Sergeant Major," Commander said slowly, "what exactly do you plan to accomplish? One small ship against an entire Devourer force." Looked at him with those dark, unreadable eyes. "I plan to show you what human myths are really about, sir." The aliens assumed she meant they would witness a glorious last stand. Humans fighting bravely before being overwhelmed and consumed. They had no idea what they were really about to see. The frigate Determination was not built for glory. It was a simple patrol ship designed for cargo escort and system monitoring. Against a Devourer scout force, it should have lasted maybe 10 minutes. "That was 4 hours ago." Commander stared at the long-range sensors in the Coalition Command Center. The readings made no sense. The Devourer force had reached New Haven Colony on schedule, but instead of the expected quick consumption and departure, they were still there, still fighting. "Confirm these readings," he ordered. "Confirmed, sir," the sensor operator replied, her flames flickering with confusion. "The human ship is still active. Colony defensive systems are still online. Civilian evacuation is proceeding." "That's impossible," General Ross said. "One frigate against 12 bioships. The humans should be dead by now." Captain K was monitoring communication channels. "Sir, you need to hear this." His voice crackled through the speakers, calm and professional despite the sounds of explosions in the background. Colony Command, this is determination. We're holding the north approach. Recommend civilian evacuation through Southern Transport Hub. We've got eyes on their main force. Determination, this is Colony Command, a panicked voice replied. We're reading massive bioship formations heading your way. You need to get out of there. Negative, Colony Command. We're not going anywhere. Just keep those transports moving. The transmission cut to static, then resumed with sounds that made the alien warriors lean forward in their chairs. They could hear weapons fire, explosions, and something else. Human voices, raised not in panic or fear, but in something that sounded almost like joy. What are they doing? Chief L asked, shifting forms nervously. The answer came through intercepted Devourer biocommunications. The Coalition had learned to decode their chemical signals years ago. What they heard chilled even veteran warriors. Pain, confusion, fear. The Devourers were afraid. Impossible, breathed General Ra. Devourers don't feel fear, they're a hive mind, they don't have individual emotions. Yet the biocommunications clearly showed distress signals, tactical confusion, and something the translation computers could only describe as requests for reinforcement. Get me a tactical overview, Commander ordered. The main screen showed New Haven Colony from orbital sensors. What they saw all military logic. The human frigate hadn't tried to engage the bioships in space combat. Instead, it had landed near the colony and was using the settlement itself as a fortress. The Devourers had been forced to deploy ground forces, and that's where everything went wrong for them. Explosions bloomed across the landscape in patterns that suggested careful preparation. The humans hadn't just arrived and started fighting. They had turned the entire colony into a trap. They're using the infrastructure against them, Captain K observed with growing amazement. Power plants as bombs, water systems as chemical weapons, agricultural equipment as improvised artillery. But that was just the beginning. As the hours passed, the alien observers realized they were witnessing something unprecedented in the war against the Devourers. And her squad were winning. Colony Command, this is determination. Her voice came through again, still maddeningly calm. We've eliminated their forward scouts. Recommend you expedite evacuation on the eastern sectors. They're bringing up heavy bioforms. Determination. We're reading hundreds of Devourer ground forces converging on your position. Copy that, we see them too. The transmission switched to an open channel, and suddenly the alien warriors could hear human soldiers coordinating their defense. Razor 6, this is Razor 1's voice commanded. Initiate Protocol 7 on my mark. Razor 1, Razor 6, Protocol 7 ready, warning this gets messy. All stations, this is Razor 1. Remember, they adapt quickly, but they're still thinking like a hive. Use that against them. Individual initiative, unpredictable tactics, and no mercy. Execute. What followed made the seasoned alien warriors question everything they thought they knew about combat. The humans fought like nothing they had ever seen. Not like the disciplined, tactical soldiers they had observed in training. Not like the primitive warriors from their myths and legends. They fought like predators who had learned to hunt other predators. Sergeant's voice crackled through the comm. Razor 2 has contact. They're adapting to our explosive patterns, switching to chemical attacks. Razor 3 confirming bioform neutralization, added Corporal Martinez. They don't like the phosphorus shells. Note for future engagements. Razor 4 has a problem, came Lieutenant's voice, strained but steady. They've adapted to conventional small arms, switching to improvised weapons. The aliens listened in growing horror as they realized what improvised weapons meant. Humans were using anything and everything as instruments of destruction. Agricultural chemicals became nerve agents. Construction equipment became siege engines. Even the colony's medical supplies were being weaponized. This is barbaric, General Ra whispered. But it was effective, brutally, terrifyingly effective. The Devourers had adapted to fight civilized armies with predictable tactics and honorable rules of engagement. They had no answer for humans who fought with the creativity of a species that had spent perfecting the art of killing its own kind. Colony Command, this is determination, reported after 6 hours of continuous combat. Eastern evacuation complete. Beginning withdrawal to secondary positions, we're down to 8 effectives. 8 from an original squad of 12, fighting hundreds of devourer bioforms that had destroyed entire coalition battle groups. Determination, this is the approaching fleet, a new voice announced. It was Admiral of the leading the coalition rescue force. We're 4 hours out. Can you hold that long? For the first time's voice showed emotion. She laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. Admiral, we've been holding for 6 hours. 4 more shouldn't be a problem, but you might want to hurry. We're starting to run low on improvised explosives. Improvised explosives? Admiral asked. Yes, sir. We used up all the proper ones 3 hours ago. Been making new ones from colony materials. Lieutenant has gotten quite creative with the water treatment facility. The transmission cut to sounds of massive explosions, followed by voice, breathless but excited. Razor 1, Razor 4. The water treatment plant conversion worked perfectly. Estimate 70% casualties on the bioform assault wave. Good work, Razor 4. Prepare secondary charges on the manufacturing complex. If they want it, they'll have to pay for it. Commander found himself gripping his chair with crystal fingers that left gouges in the metal. They're not just fighting, he said slowly. They're enjoying it. It was true. Despite being outnumbered hundreds to 1, despite losing comrades, despite facing an enemy that had consumed planets, the humans sounded almost happy. Sir, Captain K said quietly, I've been analyzing their tactical communications. They're not fighting to win. They're fighting to make it cost too much. What do you mean? Every engagement is designed to inflict maximum damage while ensuring the devourers learn the wrong lessons. They're deliberately teaching the enemy incorrect adaptations. The realization hit the alien warriors like a physical blow. The humans weren't just fighting for their lives. They were fighting strategically, thinking 3 steps ahead, turning the devourers' greatest strength, their ability to adapt, into a weakness. Colony Command, this is determination. His voice came again, now 8 hours into the battle. Civilian evacuation complete. All transport ships clear. We're falling back to final positions. Determination, the fleet is only 2 hours out. You can withdraw. Another laugh from darker than before. Negative, Colony Command. We're not done here. These bioships need to learn something before they leave. Learn what? That humans don't surrender, and they don't forget. The next hour was the worst. The aliens listened as 8 humans held an entire colony against overwhelming odds, not because they had to anymore, but because they wanted to send a message. By the time Admiral A's fleet arrived, New Haven Colony was a smoking ruin. But every single civilian had been evacuated. Every piece of valuable equipment had been destroyed rather than captured. And the Devourer scout force had been reduced to scattered remnants fleeing for their lives. The rescue shuttles found 3 humans still alive, Sergeant Major, Lieutenant, and Corporal Martinez. All 3 were unconscious, covered in wounds that should have killed them hours earlier. They were found in a crater surrounded by bioship wreckage, still clutching improvised weapons. The medical team reported that all 3 had injuries that would have incapacitated any other species. Yet they had kept fighting. Back in the Coalition Command Center, the alien warriors sat in stunned silence. Everything they thought they knew about warfare had been turned upside down. The Pacification Wars, Commander said finally. We need to know what really happened in the Pacification Wars. But deep down, they already knew. They had just witnessed what happened when humans fought without restraint, without rules, without mercy. And they realized with growing horror that this was how humans had always fought each other, for thousands of years, until they learned to be civilized. The medical bay was quiet except for the soft hum of life support machines. Sergeant Major lay unconscious in a recovery pod, her body slowly healing from wounds that would have killed most species. Tubes and monitors tracked her vital signs while medical worked to repair damage that shouldn't have been survivable. Commander stood at the foot of her bed, studying readings he couldn't quite believe. 3 broken ribs, internal bleeding, severe burns, a concussion, and enough toxic exposure to poison a warrior. Yet her body was healing at an impossible rate. Her pain tolerance is off our measurement scales, Dr. K explained, her flames dim with exhaustion from 12 hours of emergency surgery. She remained conscious and functional with injuries that would have sent any of us into shock immediately. How? Asked Captain K. I don't know. Human physiology has mechanisms we've never seen before. It's like their bodies are designed to keep fighting no matter what happens to them. General Ra joined them at the bedside. The other two are awake. They're asking about mission status and when they can return to duty. Return to duty, turned to stare at her. They can barely stand. Apparently that's not unusual for humans. Lieutenant has shrapnel wounds across his entire back. He wants to know if we need him to debrief the tactical situation. The aliens exchanged looks of disbelief. Warriors from their species would spend weeks recovering from such injuries, both physical and mental. These humans acted like they had just finished a training exercise. "I want to know about the pacification wars," said finally. "I want to know what we've been fighting alongside." Admiral arrived an hour later with a data pad containing classified information. Her expression was grim as she handed it to the assembled alien commanders. "Coalition intelligence cleared this for your review," she said. "After what happened at New Haven, they decided you needed to understand what human internal conflicts actually mean." Activated the pad and began reading. The first entry made him pause. "The pacification wars, duration 847 Earth years. Casualties estimated 4 billion humans. Resolution complete pacification achieved through total warfare protocols." 4 billion, General Ra repeated. "That's more casualties than our entire species has suffered in recorded history." "Keep reading," Admiral suggested grimly. The details became worse with each entry. Humans had fought wars against each other with methods that violated every principle of civilized combat. Total war, scorched earth, no prisoners, no civilians, no surrender. They had developed weapons designed specifically for killing humans, chemical agents that targeted human biology, biological weapons that spread through human populations, nuclear weapons that could sterilize continents. "This section," Captain K pointed to a tactical analysis, "it says they deliberately targeted civilian populations, infrastructure, and food supplies. Why would warriors fight like that?" "Because they weren't fighting for territory or resources," Admiral explained. "They were fighting for survival. When humans go to war with each other, they don't fight to win. They fight to eliminate threats completely." General Ra scrolled through battle reports that read like horror stories. "These casualty numbers, they're describing genocide." "Multiple genocides," Admiral corrected. "Humans have attempted to completely destroy their own subspecies dozens of times throughout their history. They've succeeded more often than they've failed." The alien warriors sat in stunned silence as they processed the implications. Every human in the coalition was a descendant of survivors from wars that made the current Devourer conflict seem like a minor skirmish. "The techniques we observed at New Haven," said slowly. "The improvised weapons, the psychological tactics, the willingness to die fighting." "Standard human military doctrine," Admiral confirmed. "They call it asymmetric warfare. It's designed for fighting enemies with superior numbers and technology. They developed it fighting each other." "But they seem so peaceful," General Ra protested. "Diplomatic, civilized." "Because they choose to be. Human civilization isn't their natural state. It's a learned behavior they developed to stop killing each other long enough to reach the stars." A soft chime announced that was waking up. The aliens gathered around her bed as medical monitors showed her returning to consciousness. Her eyes opened slowly, immediately alert despite her injuries. "Report," she said, her voice hoarse but steady. "Mission successful," Admiral replied. "All civilians evacuated, colony infrastructure to enemy forces, Devourer scout force destroyed or scattered." Nodded, wincing at the movement. "Casualties. 9 KIA, 3 wounded but recovering." "Could have been worse," tried to sit up, stopped by medical restraints. "How long until the next operation?" "You need at least 6 weeks recovery time," Dr. K interjected. "I'll be ready in 2 weeks." Commander stepped forward. "Sergeant Major, we need to talk about human combat doctrine, about training methods, about the pacification wars." His eyes focused on him with that familiar, unsettling intensity. "What do you want to know?" "Everything. We need to understand how to fight like you do." For a long moment, said nothing. When she spoke, her voice carried a weight that made even Admiral uncomfortable. "Sir, you don't want to fight like we do. Trust me on that." "The Devourers are winning this war," General Ra insisted. We need every advantage. Human combat doctrine isn't an advantage, replied flatly. It's a last resort. It's what you use when civilization fails and survival is the only option. Then teach us survival, demanded. Studied each alien face in turn. She seemed to be weighing something important. Finally, she sighed. Admiral, I'll need authorization to access restricted training protocols. Level 5 clearance minimum. You have it, Admiral agreed immediately. Sir, looked directly at. You're asking me to teach your people how to become human. Do you understand what that means? I understand we're losing a war. You're asking me to teach civilized species how to fight without civilization, how to kill efficiently, how to destroy everything rather than let enemies have it, how to keep fighting when every rational thought says you should surrender. The medical bay fell silent, except for the humming of machines. You want me to teach you total war? No rules, no mercy, no limits except complete victory or complete destruction. Yes, said without hesitation. Then you need to understand something first, continued. Human military training doesn't create warriors, it creates weapons that look like people. Once you learn to fight the way we fight, you can't unlearn it. It changes who you are permanently. She gestured weakly toward the data pad, containing information about the pacification wars. Every human in the coalition carries the genetic and cultural memory of what we used to be, what we can become again when necessary. We learned to be civilized because the alternative was extinction. And now you're asking me to make your people like us, to turn honorable warriors into efficient killers, to teach you methods that will work against the devourers but will also work against each other. General Ra shifted uncomfortably. You're saying human training is dangerous to the trainees. I'm saying human training reveals what people are really capable of when they stop pretending to be civilized. Some species might not survive that knowledge about themselves. Commander considered her words carefully. Around him, the other alien leaders weighed the implications. They needed to defeat the devourers, but at what cost? Will you train us? He asked finally. Smile was cold as winter starlight. Yes, sir, but remember something. Human myths aren't stories about our heroes, they're stories about our monsters. She closed her eyes, settling back into the medical pod. And you're asking me to turn your people into us. The alien warriors left the medical bay in silence, each carrying the same uncomfortable truth. They had spent days mocking human weakness, only to discover that humans weren't weak at all. They were dangerous, more dangerous than any species in the galaxy. And they had been hiding that fact behind polite diplomacy and carefully worded mission reports. Now the aliens would learn firsthand what humans had always known. Civilization was just a thin layer painted over something much darker, and once that paint was scraped away, it could never be perfectly restored. The war against the devourers was about to change. The aliens would learn to fight like humans. Whether they would still recognize themselves afterward remained to be seen. But they would win because that's what humans did. They survived no matter the cost.